Welcome to our webinar on geofencing or virtual fences or setting up zones or whatever you'd like to refer to it as. So thanks for joining, and we're just going to walk through how to set them up. Now you do have to have administrative privileges, so if when you sign in and you go to these areas you're unable to do it, then you can connect with me or talk to your administrator about getting those permissions and going from there. So I'm logged into our portal, and I'll show you where we're going to do this. We're going to go to our administration tab, and a zone or a geofence or whatever you want to call it is a scenario. So it's part of the programming that we put onto the beacons. So you do have different types of zones depending on the type of beacon that you have. Some of our customers that have been with us for years have older beacons that only allow rectangle zones. Some people have ones that can just do circles, and then the most recent beacons, so at the hardwired ones, are able to do both circles and polygon zones. The newer plug-and-play devices can only do circles. And with the circles, you are allowed to put 5 zones for each vehicle. So whether they all get the same 5 or they get their own or whatever it might be, that's any combination. But with the polygon zones, they can have 10 polygon zones as well as the 5 circles. So, that's definitely, if you're looking at the difference between the plug and plays and the hardwired, the zones you want to set up and being able to set up polygon zones, you get significantly more with the hardwired beacons. So, if I look at our programming here, I can see, my zone, my disallowed zone, they show up in here as zones, zones allowed, just depending on the way. We do have some that are already set up. And I can just click on them to go in and do editing. Once they're set up, I can look at it, see on my map exactly where that is. And this is a common one that a lot of people have here in the Lower Mainland, is your tollbridge tracking. So they have them set up both on the Golden Ears, and they have one that would be set up on the, on the Portman Bridge as well, because that tracks, every time any of their vehicles go across the bridge. So you can see this is a circular zone. This is the name we give it. We'll walk through setting one up in a moment as well, but this is, where we get a starting point of where to start, and it pulls up my map. I define on my map where I want that zone to be, gives me the details here. This isn't information I fill in based on where I put my circle on my map. It fills it in as my lat and long and how big the radius is. The type of zone, whether it's allowed or disallowed, and we'll get into that a bit as well as we set one up. A schedule, so we can have it that it's set up for a part-time, or we can define something specific. You can have real-time notification as when that happens, or you can have it emailed or texted when somebody goes across that bridge, for example, in this case, or, if you set up a specific zone that they're not allowed to be in or a zone they're not allowed to leave, you get real-time notification, or you don't have to have any notification, and you can just look at a report later, and then you define which vehicles or group of vehicles or individual vehicles apply to this. And every zone that we set up has all of those components to it. So if I wanted to do any editing, I could make those changes, and then I would just hit next and verify it and save it. So that is a circular zone. A polygon zone, you can see the difference here. Obviously, it's not a circle. It's something we've drawn, and obviously in a great place where we want to make sure that it just covers the yard I want and it doesn't cover the big road. So this has been set up, and we drew it and the points, and we'll draw one of these in a bit here too. So, the whole idea of setting this up is like setting that individual fence up, invisible fence, where you can determine, and that's based on whether you set the zone up as an allowed or disallowed zone, that you would get notification, or it would create an alert, or it would create a, you pull it on your report that every time the vehicle either enters the zone or when they exit the zone. And basically the defining of when you get that notification is the allowed or disallowed. So if I say this is an allowed zone, then when the vehicle, once they're in this zone and they leave it, so they cross from the inside to the outside, that's when you would get the notification on an allowed zone. When it's a disallowed zone, you're going to get the notification when they enter that zone. So depending on what you're using it for is, obviously when you would want that notification. So, something like this at a yard, people set them up around their supply office, different things like that, where you set it out big enough that the shipper and the guy in shipping gets the notification that the vehicle's coming and is within, say, maybe half an hour of hitting the yard, so that they can then go out, get the load ready, the vehicle drives in, the load goes onto the vehicle, off it goes, as opposed to them not knowing until the truck gets there and then getting, the load ready, wastes all that time of the driver sitting there instead of the shipper getting the load ready while the guy's still driving. Something like that would be a great example. Like I showed you on the previous one, setting up to notify and be able to track when your vehicles have crossed the bridge to be able to compare it to your billing reports. We have companies with troublesome drivers that perhaps go home in the middle of the day and take a nap. So the company sets up a zone around the employee's home so that they know, okay, he's at or near his home. Keep an eye, is he there for a couple hours or is he just driving by? What's happening? Keep an eye on things that way. Another great example, we have companies that have like machinery, like backhoes, excavators and such, which, there's quite a problem of theft for around here. So at the end of the day, they set up a zone around each of their pieces of machinery so that they get notified if somebody picks that bobcat, for example, up, puts it on the back of a truck, or if they drive it away and, turn the ignition on or hot wire a backhoe and drive it away, they're still going to get notification that, hey, that piece of machinery has left the zone that I set up, so I can go find it right away and have it back on the job by morning. So some examples of different reasons you might want them. So I'm going to go back to my home page, my scenarios. If I have an existing zone, I can, copy it. But I can also just click on Add Scenario to create a new one. So I'm going to walk through this. I'll call it our Port Moody office. We're going to set one up here. So I have the option of circular zones or polygon zones, because those are the kind of beacons that are in our vehicles. So I'm going to set up a circular zone. And as soon as I choose what I'm going to set up, it does give me these events, which beacons that this zone can be set up with. And then it's going to ask me a starting place. Now, I could just enter in a city. I could just say, British Columbia and get my map and then hunt it down and find it. Or I can put in a specific address, my call. So I'm just going to put in our address here at the office. Not going to put our postal code in. Don't need to do that. And then I click Get Map, and it pulls it up on the map. And basically, where it's going to put in the crosshairs the address I've got. So I look on my map. Here it is. My map is set to define a circular zone. If I find that, well, that doesn't line up exactly where I want it, it's not really showing, I can put my map back to pan and then be able to drag my map or zoom in and out or, change things around, you know, however I want. And when I'm ready to draw that, define my zone, I can get back to define a circular zone. Once I have that, and I'm doing, this is for the circles, then I can, wherever I click on the map is going to be the center of my circle. So I'm going to click and just click and release, and then once I move my mouse, it's going to draw that circle, and I make it be wherever I want. I close it to close the zone. I click again. Now, it's not set in stone, obviously, because you've seen we can go back and edit them as well. And if I actually, I want it a little more this way, I just click again. It takes the zone away and it starts me drawing my zone again. So I can make that be wherever I want. Right? And as we saw before, tells me what the lat and long and my radius is, so I know how big that is. You don't want to make the zone so small that the driver goes in and out of that zone. I think there is a minimum of 150 meters, but you want to make it a decent enough size that you get that alert. So then we specify the zone type. Is it an allowed or a disallowed zone? So again, allowed when the vehicle's in there and leaves. If it's disallowed, then I'm going to get the notification when they enter that zone. So select existing schedule. So I can choose, I've got some schedules set up. So 24/7, a Catlin nighttime, Catlin work hours, a late night on call, off hours, work hours. So these are ones I've created previously. I can just do the 24/7 that it's in effect all the time. Or if it's not one of my schedules that I've already created, I can define a custom schedule and create that now. So, you know, I can say every day, I can say just weekdays, just weekends, I can custom choose which days, you know, 24 hours a day or between certain specific hours. And then when I create that custom schedule, I can save it for use in other scenarios, and that's how I end up with more of these in my list. So if I just want it 24/7, that's what I'll do for today, just for example. I click to continue. Who's going to get live notification? So are we going to, I'm going to get an email, and then I want a text as well anytime anybody enters that zone. Click to continue. Which vehicles does this apply to? So I can individually assign vehicles. I can choose all my vehicles. Usually your group will say fleet, ours says vehicles itself. You know, I can choose a group if I've got like these, or just the fleet is everybody, right? So just my plow trucks. I can choose a group that have been set up. If you want information on how to do that, let me know. I can help you set up groups. I click on next, and I verify the information. It's called the Port Moody office. It's a disallowed zone. You know, it's 24/7. Who's going to be connected with and which vehicles it's assigned to. Ignore this notify monitoring station that has to do with residential. It's just there. It's always going to say no. Don't worry about it. And then I create the scenario, and it's good to go. If I really click on it and just not halfway to click on it. There we go. Now we have the Port Moody office. It's a disallowed zone, in effect 24/7, and it has 7 vehicles applied to it. If I put my mouse over the 7, it tells me which ones specifically are assigned to it. Okay, to set up polygons. Now, those of you that have rectangles, feel free to get in touch and we can walk through that as well. If it's a polygon, starts the same way. Just get my map. Tells you the details, which beacons it can be used with, how many zones can be created, and that 11 coordinates, so I can put 11 points on my map. So I'm just going to zoom out a bit. So define a polygon zone, so I can start here. I click. And you can see I just click to draw the next. So I define exactly where that might be. Give it the name. Comes up over here is an allowed or disallowed zone. And then the rest is the same from here. If I want to start again, I just would clear the zone and then start again. Click to continue, select my schedule, who's going to get notified and how. Anytime, you can see I can use my group, but not all of my beacons have this capacity because some of my beacons are other kinds. So some of ours are plug and plays and different things. So I can use my entire fleet and put them over, but it's only going to apply to the ones that have this capacity, of course. Click Next, and then Create Scenario. And that's how we set up our zones. So thank you so much for joining us today. And let me know if you have any questions. Feel free to call the office if you do, 778-355-9545.